Okay, so Jonathan was born in March of 1939 and in a small town in Keene, New Hampshire, where he attended St. James Episcopal Church. Commentators, oh, you want me to put the headphones on? Sorry. Hold on just a second. I'm making too much noise. Okay. The people in Keene, New Hampshire said that Jonathan's father was the first saint in the Daniels family. He was a much beloved physician, and he died in 1959 when Jonathan was 20, and that was a significant loss for him. As he grew up, he was not a sports guy, so he was not playing football or baseball or running track. He was interested in literature, music, and the arts, and had attended church camp. He surprised everyone by going to VMI. Everyone in New England, meaning they didn't really know about VMI. They thought that people only went to West Point or maybe Annapolis, but he was deeply affected by his freshman status, which they call rat status, and yet managed to do well and survive all of that, and was the valedictorian of his class in 1961. After VMI, he was going to go to, and he did, begin some studies at Harvard in English. But the family troubles, which were depression, especially after his father's death, his mother was deeply depressed, his sister as well. So he returned home for a while. And while he was in Boston on Easter Day, a Church of the Advent, which is a kind of an Anglo-Catholic parish. It's what we, in the Diocese of Massachusetts, called the Smells and Bells place. He had a religious conversion on Easter Sunday in 1962. When he was home with his family, he decided that English was not going to be his piece, and he began to think about ordination as a result of that conversion experience. And so through the Diocese of New Hampshire and admission to Episcopal Divinity School, he began to consider the purpose of his life. He joined the NAACP and heard Martin Luther King Jr. in person in Boston. I think King had finished his doctorate at Boston University, and there was a big clergy conference there. So he heard that. He heard him and was deeply affected by King's call to go to Selma. He had done field work in Christ Church in Providence, Rhode Island, which is a church on the margins, and he was also, I think, affected by the poor in that parish in particular. So he went to Selma, came back and forth to Boston a number of times and to Keene. And at the conclusion of his life, he was working as someone who was part of the voter registration movement. And during the time that he was there, he lived with the West family, although he had begun to live with another family who were threatened because they lived in, I would call it now, affordable housing. They lived in the projects, and they were told that if they housed him, they would lose their house. But the West family took him in, and this was in Hayneville, Alabama. And during that time, not only doing voter registration, he was tutoring children. And the the nature of his death. He had been put in jail and attacked with fire hoses and dogs. And he and 3 other companions had been released from jail, and they were going to go to the corner store to get some soda. And they were going to a corner store that was known to serve Blacks in that area. And yet when they got there and the door opened, there was a deputy sheriff with a shotgun who told them to leave. And I think there was a brief response about they were just there to get some soda. And the deputy hoisted the shotgun, and Jonathan pushed Ruby Sales, a young 17-year-old Black girl, out of the way, and he took the shotgun blast and was killed instantly. The Roman Catholic priest who was with them was also wounded and not expected to survive, but he did. Jonathan died on his mother's 50th birthday. And it was a long time before the Episcopal Church knew about his death, because there were so many other deaths during that time. The social location, could you scroll down just a little, Wayne? The Birmingham bombings had happened. The 4 little girls in the church school who had died. Bloody Sunday had happened. And other civil rights workers had been missing and then found murdered. So I just wondered what you thought the social location that was part of Jonathan's life, how you think that might have influenced where he went and what he did with his faith. Bonnie, you need to unmute. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Well, I don't know if I have an answer. Yeah, no, I'm afraid I don't have
That's okay.
an idea here.
Linda?
Yeah.
I'm just reminded of Esther that Kate has been walking us through, and being raised up for such a time as this. And when we are called to be Christian witness, it's not always an easy task.
I'm thinking that because he didn't quite fit in with the norm of the small town, that he was not a sports guy, and that's what everybody did. I think that had an effect on him. I think that his father, with this model of service to others, he was rarely home in the Daniels family, because he was always out helping others. I think that the experience in field work and the fact that his spirit was moved in the church. He was going to be a candidate for ordination. His conversion happened in a church service. And when he was at Episcopal Divinity School, I'll give you a quote of his during the singing of the Magnificat during Evensong. He knew that he should go, that he should kind of put, it would be a life marked by doing, not just by knowing.
Linda?
Yeah.
This is Betsy. it dovetails well with, his story dovetails well with Kate's devotion this morning. I
Yes.
didn't listen to all of it, but the part I heard was that we're defined by who we are by our actions. And
Yeah.
Jonathan's actions certainly define him as a Christian witness.
It's, well, Tertullian in 197 said that the blood of the martyrs is the seedbed of the church. And that's a piece that I don't think we expect as a witness to our faith in contemporary times. We don't really expect to be martyred for it. And yet when we get to the icon that was written in his honor 50 years after his birth, we'll be reminded of many contemporary martyrs to the faith.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
When his murder occurred, did it really make national news, or was it really not a big event because of what the country was going through at that time?
It depended, as near as I can tell from what I've read, it depended upon where you were. Of course, in New England and in Boston, the sites of his deepest relationships, let's say, it was a big deal. In other places, I don't really know. It was unlikely to be picked up by the New York Times because there were other deaths. There were so many deaths, and there are those who died during the civil rights movement, this long time period, whose names we never did know. It took a lot of lobbying by his mother in New Hampshire to keep his memory and witness alive. And it wasn't until, trying to think, I have a date somewhere. It took I think it was let me just catch this for a minute. It wasn't until 1993 that he was added to the calendar of saints. And that took considerable lobbying. And part of the fact that he was voted in unanimously at General Synod was because his commemoration was proposed by both the Diocese of New Hampshire and the Diocese of Alabama, which was a stunner for the church. One of the things I love about the Episcopal Church is that names are continually added to this great cloud of witness. In Canada, that's not true. There was, when the prayer book was revised, there was a set number of people, and there doesn't seem to be any process by which others are added. But in the Episcopal Church, you can lobby for your favorite saint and have the whole national church say, yes, this is somebody that we need to remember and whose life we feel is full of God's Spirit. So there's a remarkable video called Here Am I, Send Me, that was done by Vermont Public Broadcasting. It's 83 minutes long. It's narrated by Sam Waterston, and it includes a lot of footage of the marches and Louds County, which was called Bloody Louds County, because of the number of deaths there. It's worth seeing, but I didn't want to take up our time today with viewing it. It's long, but there are other videos available as well. I was curious that VMI established a humanitarian award in honor of Jonathan Daniels. And the recipients include both John Lewis, who died recently, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And you can see their addresses to the cadets on the VMI website if that would interest you. I went down a lot of rabbit holes and spent a lot of time with Jonathan over the last couple of weeks, and it's just remarkable. He was also featured in an article in Yankee magazine. I just came across that lately, that had been tucked into my files at home. So that's another place to look if you want to know more about him. But I recommend that video, Here Am I, Send Me. The texts that were chosen for his commemoration are Isaiah, the vision in the temple, where the prophet encounters the holy and is asked, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah says, here am I, send me. And so that's entirely part of Jonathan's life. And the gospel chosen for his feast day is Luke, the Magnificat, Mary's beautiful song. A piece from Galatians where Paul is saying to the church, there is no longer Jew or Greek, no longer slave or free, no longer male or female, but we are all one in Christ Jesus. And the psalm is lovely too, where it speaks about what God speaks, that God would speak peace, and that steadfast love and faithfulness will meet, and righteousness and peace will kiss each other. So those are there for you if you want further inspiration just to rest with him. There have been, I guess it's an anniversary date. There's a pilgrimage trip in Alabama that's also on video with Michael Curry, and then he preaches. And the feast day commemorations in his home parish in Keene also feature Bishop Curry. You can look up Ruby Sales. This is the young woman who, well, she's not young anymore. This is a young woman whose life he saved. She found it difficult to speak for 7 months after his death. And she has had a remarkable life and founded the Jonathan Daniel, well, in honor of him, it's called Spirit House, and it's dedicated to him. And part of her work in 2000, I guess, well, I'm not sure that that's the date. That center has documented over 2,000 state-sanctioned deaths of people of color, and 98% of them were not armed. So it blows a bit of a stereotype about the use of justified force. Anyway, Ruby Sales has a BA in history from Manhattanville College. She did all of her coursework for her doctorate at Princeton, but stopped before the thesis was done, and taught for a couple of years at the University of Maryland. She is one of 50 African Americans spotlighted in the new Smithsonian Museum of African American History and Culture. And she has been a part of the Sojourners community for a long time. She wrote an article in August of 2014, but she's featured in a number of videos if you want to know more about her as well. So these are some quotes by others about him, and then there's a quote by him. Michael Curry, an ordinary, normal seminarian who paid attention to the gospel of Jesus. When he sensed a call deep within, he responded. When Martin Luther King Jr. heard about Jonathan's death, he said, "Our grief should give way to a sense of Christian honor and nobility, for this church and the movement gave to the world a true follower of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ." Here's the piece. I don't have a statement from Jonathan about his conversion experience at Church of the Advent, but this is from Evensong at the Episcopal Divinity School. I had come to evening prayer as usual that evening, was, as usual, singing the Magnificat with the love and reverence I have always felt for Mary's glad song. As the lovely hymn of the God-bearer continued, I found myself peculiarly alert, suddenly straining toward the decisive, luminous, spirit-filled moment that would, in retrospect, remind me of others, particularly at Easter 3 years ago. He hath exalted the humble and the meek. He has filled the hungry with good things. I knew I must go to Selma. And he did. What else would you like to know about him? Any other questions? Michael?
Linda,
Yeah.
I was taken by the quote by Michael Curry, an ordinary, normal seminarian who paid attention to the gospel of Jesus. When I think about the great cloud of witnesses and what that gift is to us from our church, being named to that group is certainly an honor for the individual, but really for us, it's giving us some role models. It's giving us some people whose actions we can aspire to. And I'm trying to put myself living in the time with Jonathan and thinking that there really was nothing remarkable about him.
No.
The thought process to go to VMI was internal.
Yeah.
The conversion experience was internal.
Yeah.
These were things that spoke to other people around him. They were all internal. And yet, by reflecting on these things deeply, he found a way to really live out the gospel of Jesus. And that just speaks to me in that the things that I do in my life are very normal. They are not remarkable to many other people. But can I find a way to live the gospel of Jesus the way that he did?
Absolutely, Michael. And I, when I first read the quote from Michael Curry, I was like, well, aren't all seminarians paying attention to the gospel of Jesus? Or aren't all of us who claim the faith paying attention to the gospel of Jesus? And yet, there were particular moments of inspiration by the Spirit that moved him beyond paying attention to, as you said, moving into action. And I thought, I guess a week or so ago, that maybe we needed more people doing voter registration during this election. I don't know. There are still plenty of barriers. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger this week who decided that he was going to fund the reopening of all sorts of polling places across the United States that have been shut because of lack of money. So I really don't know where our particular actions will take us toward justice and compassion, or whether it will mean saving the life of another. I do know that we have to pay attention because God has lots of opportunities for us to be of service to the kingdom. So I've included some other collects for you from the Book of Common Prayer, the prayers for social justice, the poor and the neglected, and a thanksgiving for heroic service. And what I'd like to do now is show you the icon that was at the Episcopal Divinity School. The Episcopal Divinity School has left Boston and has gone to New York and is a part of Union Seminary in New York right now. So this work, as I said, was commissioned by the Jonathan Daniels Fellowship Committee. I can't tell you any more about them, but it came to the seminary in 1989 as a completed piece. And what I want to remind you about, when you look at an icon, the perspective is not in the distance as when we look at most art, where we're standing in a place of observation and we look into the distance. So perspective is normally a big part of regular art. But when you encounter an icon, the perspective narrows to you. So you take the the icon, and it's supposed to come toward you as you are observing it, so that you're included. You're not an observer as much as you are a part of this witness. So Alexander Gassel, who's a Massachusetts iconographer, was commissioned to do this piece in the Russian style, which means that it's not just a picture of Jonathan and one of the West children, or him standing with a Bible or whatever. The Russian style includes lots of other witnesses. So just give me some feedback, what you notice, and then I'll walk you through it before we need to end. So what do you notice?
Just notice all the different groupings of people.
Yeah. What does that say to you, Megan? That there are bunches of people there.
Kind of got it pulled up on my phone, scrolling
Okay.
through, like close up all the different little people. But
Yeah. One of the
lives
things.
get touched.
Yeah,
Lives
yeah, go ahead.
no, it just.
One of the things that it says to me is that he's not alone. There's the St. Francis icon from Assisi. He's not, Jesus is on the cross. It's called the San Damiano cross. Anyway, there are lots of people with him. There are lots of biblical characters and other characters surrounding him. And so that's true here as well, that there are other martyrs, there are other witnesses to the faith, and he is surrounded himself by a great cloud of witness.
I love Jesus and the three women with him. They're at towards the top left. I'm assuming that's Jesus and the Marys.
No, but
No?
that's a good
Okay.
thought. That's a good thought. That's a good thought. Okay, let's see. Betsy, you wanted to say something.
What is the significance of it appears to be a medal in the upper left-hand corner?
I can tell you what the iconographer said. It's an icon. He said it's a symbol of the creator. Although sometimes in icons you'll see this kind of hand coming down that may be a symbol of the spirit or a symbol of creation, but the iconographer says that the sun and the moon and the lamb on the throne and the left-hand side is a sign of the creator. So this is not a sign I'm familiar with, but that's what he said. And below the lamb is the Episcopal Divinity School buildings and the chapel. Anybody else notice anything before I do this description?
Linda, in the bottom right.
Yeah.
The people there look more modern.
They
and
are.
The
Yeah.
man and the woman look, I can't, it's too small for me to really see that well, but.
Well, and when we tried to blow up the icon, either from I have a commemorative card that's on white. You begin to lose the details of the faces.
Yeah.
So, especially the faces of the people of color. But let me tell you what Gessel says. So, to the left are Justin Martyr, Perpetua, Agnes, and Blandina. Blandina, who was one of the martyrs of Lyon. And Agnes is my feast day saint. I was ordained on the feast of Saint Agnes. She's commemorated as virgin and martyr. And I remember telling the bishop that I didn't intend to be either. So he was not happy with me. But so there are martyrs to the left, and to the right are saints who represent the love of creation and human and divine love. So in the front, you would recognize Francis of Assisi. And Julian of Norwich is there. I don't know whether that has her holding a hazelnut, perhaps. And then Aelred of Rievaulx. So we get down to Jonathan's level. He's in the center. He's surrounded by angels. So that's a canopy of angels in the doorway of the chapel. To his immediate left and right, well, as we face it to the right, no, to the left, sorry, is Mary in the scroll of the Magnificat, and to the right is St. John. That chapel at EDS is named after St. John. To the left of them are the martyrs of Japan, who were killed in 1597. And to the right, the martyrs of Uganda, including Janai Luwum, who was then the Archbishop, assassinated by Idi Amin. On the bottom, beginning on the left, is Bishop John Coleridge Pattison and the Martyrs of Melanesia. Constance and her companions, we heard about them fairly recently because they died while they were nursing the victims of yellow fever. and typhus. I think it was both typhus and yellow fever. Anyway, so martyrs of the church. At their feet are Dorothy Day on the left, from a Catholic worker, the founder of the Catholic worker movement, who lived among the poor. And Catholic worker houses are all over the country and follow her writings and her teachings. And next to Dorothy Day is F.D. Maurice. In the center are Stephen Biko, martyr in South Africa, Martin Luther King Jr., Absalom Jones, who you know was the first African-American priest in the Episcopal Church, and Bernard Maizeki, who was martyred in Rhodesia right around the turn of the century, 1896. On the right are all of the martyrs in El Salvador. They were killed while I was in seminary the first time. Jesuit priests, the housekeeper and her daughter, murdered in November of 1989. Near them is Archbishop Oscar Romero, who will be included in the cloud of witness discussions. I think John Baugh is doing Oscar Romero, who was assassinated as he was celebrating the Eucharist. Then there's another martyr that I didn't know about, another one who went to the Episcopal Theological Seminary, who was Bishop K.G. Turian. He was in the class of 1905. He was a bishop in Armenia who was killed in 1915 by the Ottoman Turks. So this is quite a little catechism in itself about the history, or partial history, of the martyrs of the church, with whom Jonathan would have had a special resonance. Any further thoughts on the icon? Or on anything about Jonathan Daniels? We have about 3 minutes.
Linda, I was curious about his sister. What happened? Did her life turn around? Did she help his mother with her lobbying?
I think she must have. She's featured in the Here Am I, Send Me video, the PBS video.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember when Jonathan's mother died. It wasn't all that long ago, but she was very active in keeping his memory alive.
The sister was as well?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, Bonnie, for your question earlier, though the death of Jonathan Daniels sent shockwaves across the nation, it was quickly lost in the larger canvas of the civil rights movement, the Poor People's Marches, Resurrection City, the Detroit riots, the assassination of Martin Luther King himself, all overshadowed the killing of Jonathan Daniels in Hayneville. And part of this difficult legacy is that Tom Coleman, who was the deputy who killed him, was set free by a jury, and then there was a federal case against him, and he was set free by that jury as well. And when interviewed, and you'll see him live kind of on this video, this Here Am I, Send Me video, he said, I have no regrets. I would shoot them again tomorrow. They had no business being here. And so the question is, what's our business? What's our business as Christians? And as Michael said, what's our witness?
Well, also what Michael said about the ordinary spirit of people. To me, the extraordinary part of Jonathan and other saints like this, or Christian witnesses, is that they do something about it. I'm not doing anything about it. I have a normal, ordinary life, and I'm not doing anything. But all those people who do have normal, ordinary lives, who do something, they're the saints. So thank you for telling us about Jonathan, Linda.
You're welcome. And I think we should all be prepared for God to send us a postcard with, this is where you can help. This is where you need to go. It can be very simple. There's a lovely story in the Ottawa newspaper yesterday about a child with a cleft palate who's in the middle of several reconstructions, whose family went and adopted a dog with a cleft palate that nobody wanted. You know, is that ordinary or is it remarkable? It opened my heart. And apparently this little kid, who's like 5, takes his nap on the dog bed with the dog. Maybe he'll grow up to be a vet. Who knows? Yeah.
For those of us who are doing the sacred ground, I don't remember which week it is in the readings, but there's a reading that mentions the need for white people to step out of our place of comfort and privilege. And that, I think Jonathan is just a beautiful example of that. And then also this cloud of witnesses of martyrs that he's surrounded by. You know, I think sometimes we think if we're going to do the right thing, that on the other side of that, there's appreciation or good things are going to happen for us. It's going to be all bright and shiny and great.
Yeah.
It's going to be like these living halos. But actually, there's a suffering in that. And but then I think too of Jesus saying, you know, follow me and I will give you rest. That once we get past the shock of not being appreciated by those we step away from, that privileged group that we step away from, you know, there's deep joy and rest. And because I watched that video and he was so at peace.
Mm-hmm.
And I think of him pulling her to the side so that he could be the one shot instead of her. And I actually imagine him feeling privileged to be able to do that and grateful to be able to do that and to be there. And that he's got to be looking down at her life and going, God, I did the right thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well,
it's beautiful. It's just beautiful to me.
The seed bed is that his shedding of blood enabled her life to be as full as it is. And in the video too, or maybe it was in the article, I can't remember, somebody said that there are a lot of kids named Jonathan in Keene, New Hampshire. So it's a different kind of legacy and seed bed, but it's keeping a witness going further. Yeah. Michael, did you have something? I thought you had your, no, okay. The bishop, I looked up the Bishop of New Hampshire to see who was bishop when he was coming into the church. And I didn't know that person's name in particular, but I want to give thanks to him too for seeing in this ordinary human the possibility that God could do something wonderful through him. Thank you all for joining me in this celebration of the life of Jonathan Myrick Daniels. He died at 26. His feast day is August the 14th.
Thank you for honoring him.
It was my privilege, really.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, have a good day. Thanks for coming. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, Linda.
bye.